DBX is the last throw of the dice for Aston Martin. This super luxury SUV simply has to succeed for the brand, and it certainly has wider appeal than anything the company has produced in its entire history. Virtually all the basic chassis technology and handling development here is Aston's own, though the rest of the engineering is Mercedes sourced, and the brand has delivered a whole new standard of cabin quality. If this car doesn't work for Aston, then it's hard to see what else would.
If we're to believe its brand, the DBX is Aston Martin reinvented. Launched in 2020, this was Aston's first clean sheet design since the Vanquish of 2001. This newcomer built on a bespoke platform and assembled in a Welsh factory constructed especially for it. This was Aston Martin's first SUV and its first five-seater, inherited by a new boss poached from the company's engineering partner Mercedes, overseeing a rejuvenated business now headed up by a new majority shareholder, Canadian billionaire Lawrence Stroll. Sounds encouraging, but not everyone believes in this car or its reinvented brand. The DBX was central to the company's 2018 stock market flotation, which turned out to be one of the most disastrous in recent years and led to the removal of the Aston Martin CEO, Dr. Andy Palmer, who envisaged this car in the first place. Some think it's the very antithesis of everything the company stands for. And you could certainly question its fundamental Britishness, given the fact that its engine and gearbox are both borrowed from Mercedes, as is all its media tech. For all that, though, it's hard not to admire the spirit behind the very British team who spent so long creating this model. Given the Mercedes partnership and financial constraints throughout the project, it would have been so easy for them to simply rebody one of the German maker's SUVs and tick the crossover box that every rival has also had to address. Instead, the team chose to create that bespoke platform that undergirds this car. No rival can offer such a thing, and all are compromised, to some extent, as a result. Without the need to share a chassis or adapt existing architecture, the DBX could be created just as Aston wanted, with even the borrowed Mercedes bits tailored uniquely for it. Bolted to that is the brand's first four-wheel drive system and its first air suspension setup. This mated to something equally new, 48-volt, electrically powered active anti-roll bars. The result should be special, should feel uniquely Aston Martin, and should bring something dynamically fresh to the segment for SU VIPs. Does it? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. Aston Martin makes sports cars, but can't it also make sporting cars too? The difference, as the company's rivals have found, is crucial. In today's market, with sporting models like high-performance SUVs in the portfolio, some form of ongoing profitability is possible. Without them, future financial ruin is certain. Which is why we find ourselves testing an Aston Martin that, in theory, will function for family, ford rivers, and find its way to a remote glamping site. In practice, though, this, the company's first SUV, will mostly be expected to do something rather more difficult: feel like an Aston Martin. Rather surprisingly, it does, from the first press of the glass starter button. That flare of revs as the engine explodes into life with a bellow from the rasping sports exhaust is there to make brand loyalists feel at home. An extended button press diminishes it for those times when you might wish to keep a lower profile. The fascia gear shift buttons look just like those in the Aston supercar too. You're getting the message. This car sits you as commandingly as a conventional SUV, but it clearly doesn't want to be one. But can it really be an Aston Martin? Under the bonnet lies a 4-litre petrol V8 borrowed from the Mercedes-AMG E63, which makes it a slightly different unit from the very similar one used in Aston's Vantage and DB11 models, here developing 550 PS and 700 Newton-meters of torque. For this installation, this unit gets revised turbocharging and cooling systems, plus a lower compression ratio. The active four-wheel drive system and torque vectoring rear differential is borrowed from an E63 too, working with an active centre transfer case that allows torque to be moved between the front and rear axles, depending on the car's tractional needs at any given moment. Torque distribution can vary between 47% of power sent to the front or 53% sent to the rear via a carbon fibre prop shaft, and up to 100% of the V8 engine's grunt can even be sent rearwards if required. Transmission choice you'd expect to be either the 7-speed auto used by the E63 or the 8-speed ZF auto that features in Aston's other models, but in the event it's neither. A 9-speed DCT auto decided upon so that the engineers could provide for the kind of decent towing capacity that the brand knew some DBX owners might want. It's rated at 2.7 tonnes. That choice of gearbox slightly limits ultimate torque and therefore performance, but it's still pretty rapid, 62 miles an hour from rest in a standard DBX, achievable in 4.5 seconds en route to 181 miles an hour. We can't really imagine why you'd want to go faster than that in a DBX, but if you do, you'll need the version we're trying here, the even quicker DBX 707. Those numbers stand not for some imagined Bond reference, but for the raised 707 PS engine output, a vast increase which required a completely different wet clutch version of the auto gearbox to cope with the big increase in torque to 900 Newton-meters. This also improves launch capability, contributing to an improvement in the 0 to 62 mile an hour sprint time to 3.3 seconds, while the top speed rises to 193 miles an hour. Whatever your choice of DBX, inevitably, to get the most from it, you'll need to get familiar with the various drive modes, which on this 707 model are more conveniently accessed through buttons on the lower console rather than being buried away in screen submenus. One of our irritations with the standard model. GT should be your default pick. It's the development engineer's preference too. But if you want to get the emotively tuned sports exhaust crackling, there are also Sport or Sport Plus options, plus an individual menu allowing you to make the most of all the new engineering tech, much of it never previously used by the brand. This includes 4-chamber air suspension, adaptive Bilstein dampers, and a 48-volt e-arc or electric anti-roll control system with motorised roll-cancelling active anti-roll bars. Aston chassis expert Matt Becker, who's since departed for McLaren, worked hard on that anti-roll system and it's paid off. Other brands use it to banish cornering roll entirely, but that just feels a little weird and can sometimes even be nausea-inducing. So, a bit of roll has been allowed for on initial corner turn-in before the body firms up progressively as speed and G-forces increase and the prodigious 2.2-tonne curb weight kicks in. It's all brilliantly judged. Interestingly, Becker and his team decided against using the kind of four-wheel steering tech that features on obvious rivals, believing that it corrupts the purity of the car's steering feel, usually a downside with uber-fast big SUVs of this sort. It isn't here, the rack quick and direct, but still natural and intuitive. The credits are racking up here, and we'd award more for the strong, progressive 6-piston brakes, which gain ceramic discs with this 707 version. Equally good is the adaptive air suspension setup, Aston's first a proper 3-chamber system, another element upgraded for the 707. Depending on the drive setting you choose, this allows you to drive the DBX either as a sports car or a Gran Turismo. If at the end of the kind of long, tiresome day that's made it possible for you to afford this Aston in the first place, you'd prefer the latter. You'll find that the suspension's generally more adept at smoothing away urban surfaces than is the case with segment rivals, though poorer tarmac tears can still catch it out, and drive mode selection affects it quite a lot. The ride's best with the drive option set to GT or in the individual menu with the chassis on GT. For most pleasurable journeying results, we'd pair this with the power or throttle response option set to Sport and the fiery exhaust on Sport Plus. In this 707 version, both these settings can be paired with a race start function that gets plenty of use by the near-identical version of this model that's used at Grand Prix as the Formula One pace car. Talking of settings, there are also off-road modes too. Yes, despite its modest 190mm of standard ground clearance, the DBX will properly go off-road. The 4x4 rough surface settings are Terrain, where the air suspension lifts the car higher, and Terrain Plus, higher still, which is the only off-road setting you get on this 707 model. With everything raised, the car's approach angle can be as much as 25.7 degrees, and the departure angle can be as much as 27.1 degrees, with a breakover angle of up to 18.8 degrees. Plus, there's a hill descent control for slithering down slippery slopes. All of it's enough to ensure that this car will go far further off-road than any owner will ever need it to. Arguably more useful, though, is the 500mm wading depth. There's even a breather pipe on the rear differential for situations such as reversing a trailer into water when launching a boat. But of course, this car's much happier on tarmac, where the lack of semi-autonomous driving aids is a disappointment, but journeying refinement is a pleasant surprise. That's no accident. There's a double-skin bulkhead for the first time on an Aston Martin, which acts like a noise-isolating structure between the cabin and the engine. Plus, the Pirelli P0 tyres feature noise-reducing technology, and the structure incorporates over 30 kilograms of sound-deadening material. So, a lot's been achieved here. Are there issues? Well, as long as you can afford the lottery-level asking price, the answer is very few. Though on the standard model, the auto gearbox can sometimes be a touch slower than an enthusiast might like to kick down, a problem far less evident with the faster shifting transmission of this 707 version, thanks to its revised final drive ratio. There are, of course, the enormous running costs of that thirsty V8 to consider, which even for the super rich are surely questionable in an era where similarly performing rivals like BMW's XM can give you commuting mileage without troubling fossil fuel at all. That's courtesy of plug-in hybrid tech, also developed for this car, but not yet available at the time of our test. Perhaps then the ultimate DBX is yet to come. Conversely, you may feel that in this top 707 form, the most desirable version of this surprisingly engaging Aston is already here. It's all a matter of perspective. Whatever the variant in question, we'd find it hard to wholeheartedly recommend a class rival over this car. Unlike its competitors, it's not compromised by a carryover platform originally developed for something quite different. And there's just enough Aston Martin in this car to make it feel as special as it needs to be. The DBX delivers on its promises. Now its brand needs to do the same. Is this how you expected an Aston Martin SUV to look? Possibly. The brand's chief creative officer, Marek Reichman, and his team have managed to bring a level of sculpture and sleekness to a sector perhaps not normally known for elegance. The DBX is just over 5 metres long, which makes it longer than a Porsche Cayenne, but shorter than a Bentley Bentayga, to give you some size perspective. In the metal, it doesn't really look quite as big as it actually is, thanks to a lower roofline than many of its rivals and clever sculpting of the sleek aluminium and composite body panels. The fastback look cleverly positions the visual mass of the car over the rear wheels, just as you see in Aston Martin sports cars, while the long wheelbase allows a lower, sleeker roofline, giving elegance to the overall shape. The B-pillar is fashioned from glass, giving the appearance of one piece of glazing in an uninterrupted sweep down the side of the car. And there are big 22-inch wheels in a choice of two designs. Even larger 23-inch rims are optional on this 707 version, and we have them here. From the front, you'd recognise it as an Aston, the swept back by LED headlights flanking the brand's familiar trapezoidally shaped grille. Other familiar brand touches include distinctive customisable vents in the bonnet and the front wings, and you can tell this 707 version apart from the standard model by its different front splitter profile and the way that the larger grille's 6 horizontal bars have a split finish. This 707 variant's daytime running lights are different too. In the standard model, they double as indicators, encircling an aerodynamic duct. The rear is even more distinctive, featuring full-width, slim LED tail lamps similar to those of the Vantage and a protruding rear spoiler, contributing to aerodynamics that make a rear window wiper unnecessary. We'd still want one, though, for overnight dew and autumn leaves. The upswept flip at the base of the rear screen is also Vantage-like, and lower down, twin tailpipes protrude out of a rear diffuser section surrounded by a starburst of cooling holes. This large diameter satin black finish version of the quad exhaust system is exclusive to the top 707 version. The optional yellow highlights here are for extroverts only. And what's more important here, of course, is what you can't see, the dedicated platform that most rivals just don't have, and the bonded aluminium construction that Aston Martin has carried over from its sports cars, hence this structure's astonishing torsional rigidity. Unfortunately, that hasn't done much to offset this SUV's prodigious curb weight, rated at a portly 2,245 kilograms. Finally, before we leave the exterior, a look at the engine, a work of art hand-built by Mercedes-AMG. The days are numbered for this classic 4-litre twin-turbo V8, but it will be fondly remembered. Right, time to check out the interior. Now, the fiddly pop-out door handles might irritate, but the heavy frameless doors are wide opening. The air suspension, height adjustable by up to 95mm, enables a low access entry mode, and unlike other Aston Martins, the apertures have completely flat sills. Let's get comfortable inside, where you're faced with a big 3-spoke wheel, a lower centre stack that lights up upon ignition, and the kind of high centre console that properly designates an uber-high performance SUV. Two things might surprise you about this cabin. First, the seating position. Though hardly Range Rover-like, it's quite commanding, in marked contrast to the lower set arrangements favoured by SUVs from other sports car manufacturers like Lamborghini and Ferrari. The second surprise might lie with the quality of interior trim, which is a big step forward, given this to be the part of Astons that usually lets them down when rated against the highest luxury segment standards. Take stock of your surroundings once ensconced in the enveloping sports seats, and you'd have to conclude that this is a cabin fit for comparison with any super SUV rival you'd care to name. Clothed in stitched bridge of weir leather with fine metal inserts, a lovely Alcantara roof roller blind, and the optional inclusion of Alcantara and bespoke wood trimming. Over 200 hours of dedicated handcrafted assembly goes into each DBX cabin, and it shows. Even the bottoms of the door bins are lined with hide. But not everything is ideal. The recent design trend for reducing dashboard button clutter appears to have passed Aston by. The number of switches and knobs you've to contend with swelled by the decision to retain the brand's usual gear shift buttons on top of the fascia, where they're a bit of a stretch away. Even without these, there are nearly 30 other physical switches dotted around, though provision of these does at least reduce the need to interact with the outdated 10.25-inch central infotainment screen. The attractive white-stitched, leather-faced dash design thrusts this monitor into pride of place in the centre of the fascia, drawing your hand towards it, at which point you realise that the software is sluggish and it's of the older tech kind that doesn't respond to touch. Instead, you have to navigate around the screen using this lower rotary selector, partly concealed behind a sort of hand perch, which seems to serve no apparent purpose apart from preventing your fingers from getting easy access to the dial. Mercedes ditched this design years ago, and Aston should have taken the opportunity to do the same here. Even more annoying, if you don't happen to be a follower of Steve Jobs, is that the smartphone mirroring system can't work with Android Auto, only Apple CarPlay. Such are the issues with hand-me-down technology. There isn't really that much included in the Aston skinned menus either, though you do get navigation and a decent 800-watt 14-speaker Harman Samsung bespoke audio system. The 12.3-inch instrument cluster display is a little more up-to-date, but not much. In Sport Plus mode, the rev counter flashes excitingly when approaching the rev limit, but more practical functionality is lacking. This screen can't display full-width mapping, nor in the section between the two virtual dials is there the four-wheel drive readout you'd expect on an SUV or the stopwatch feature you might hope for on an Aston Martin. Instead, just the basics feature with trip, nav, radio, media, telephone, assistance and service sections selectable via steering wheel buttons. The stalks behind that wheel don't feel especially high-end, and when you activate the indicator side one, there's a ticking sound that's been described as being akin to a goblin cobbler trapped behind the fascia, which is about right. Design points are regained, though, when it comes to practicality. That high centre console we mentioned earlier frees up space below for a big open storage area that includes a phone charging mat and is big enough to take a 1.5 litre water bottle or something like a handbag, the latter quite appropriate, given that this will be a model that will be driven by more women than any other in Aston's history. Further back, between the seats, there's what looks like a twin-lidded box, but isn't. Inside are twin USB-A ports, a 12-volt socket, and, in another nod to the recent past, an SD card slot. The brand has forgotten an overhead sunglasses compartment. There are no ticket clips in the sun visors, and the door bins are small, but you do get a big glove box. What else? Well, as we've said, the materials you get feel very high-end, especially if you spend heavily on the kind of Q by Aston Martin optional trimming we have here. We're a little disappointed, though, by the way everything's been screwed together by the Welsh factory. This test car had rather too many squeaks and rattles. On the plus side, the supportive, enveloping sports seats are brilliant with either 12 or 16-way power adjustment, depending on the spec you've chosen, both including 4-way lumbar support and a memory function. Forward vision from them is fine too, thanks to that raised position. Your rearward view, though, is much more compromised, thanks to the sharply tapered rear window line and the thick pillars. So you'll be needing the standard all-round sensors and 360-degree surround camera system. The designers apparently spent 6 months perfecting this car's driving position, and the result is not only a good view over the bonnet, but also something you don't find on a DB11 or a Vantage, pedals that line up with the seat and the steering column, the latter being power adjustable. You might have noticed this lower drive mode selector. Don't worry, you don't have to have it with this garish lime yellow outer bezel. What's annoying, though, is that it only comes with this pricey DBX 707 variant. On an ordinary DBX, you have to fiddle about within the centre screen submenus to change drive modes, which seems an astonishing oversight. Otherwise, though, apart from a bit of extra carbon fibre trim and a dark chrome switchgear finish, both of which can be added into a standard model, the 707 cabin's pretty much the same as the ordinary version. Right, let's take a seat in the rear. Now, as at the front, you enter through a frameless door with cutaway sills, so trousers and dresses won't be smeared with mud when exiting the car. And once inside, you'll find that two adults will fit very comfortably. Thanks to this huge centre tunnel, a third will be much less happy. Aston says that rear passengers were central to the design process. The design team wanted an inclusive feeling for those in the back of the car, but without the feeling that rear occupants were leaning over those in the front, which can sometimes be the result of so-called stadium-style rear seating designs. In the event, it's all been very well judged, with knee and leg room that's difficult to better in the class. Headroom's good too, despite the standard provision of this vast panoramic glass roof, which gives the cabin an airy, spacious feel. You might hope that the bench base would slide, or at least that the backrest would recline, but no. Still, there's lots to distract you from the banal practicalities of that sort, like the classy stitching that features on the seat back pockets and the overhead grab handles, the right-hand one featuring the most unusual coat hook we've yet seen. You get bottle holders in the doors, there are connectivity ports, the twin vents are separated by smart climate controls, and further vents decorate B-pillars embellished with little circular speakers. Let's finish with a look at the boot, the tailgate for which does of course have power operation, but which can't be activated with your foot unless you pay extra, which does seem a bit mean. It rises to reveal a gratifyingly large loading area, square of shape, and rated at 632 litres in size. That's 138 litres less than a Porsche Cayenne Turbo, but 16 litres more than a Lamborghini Urus, and 148 litres more than a Bentley Bentayga. Getting large items in is aided by the way the air suspension allows you to lower the loading sill height via these left-hand buttons, and you get these silver floor rails and a lovely stitched parcel shelf. But bag hooks have been forgotten. There's 62 litres of further room beneath this cargo base, but that's only just big enough for the space-saver spare wheel. Folding the 40-20-40 split rear seat back is aided by these right-hand side buttons, but they're not much use because when you activate them, the seats don't properly spring forward. So you have to go round to the passenger door and flatten them manually anyway. And even then, they don't fold quite flat. With everything pushed forward, there's 1,529 litres of space on offer. You didn't think it was going to be inexpensive, did you? And of course it isn't. The standard DBX retailing at the time of this test in autumn 2022 from around £172,000. Inevitably, you'll need a lot more than that for this faster 707 version. At the time of this review, the cost of one of these was £190,000. And there'll be lots to add to those figures, of course, once you've begun to tick a few options boxes. As for rivals, well, perhaps the most obvious one, Lamborghini's Urus, sat midway between DBX and DBX 707 pricing at the time of this test, just under £178,000. The Lambo's slightly less practical, though, and not as nice to use day to day. It's just that little bit rougher edged. You could argue that something like a V8-powered Range Rover Sport P510e for about £50,000 less is rather closer to the kind of car this Aston Martin is trying to be. But that's a plug-in hybrid, as is the other more exclusive V8 SUV contender that springs to mind, the BMW XM, another model similarly priced to a DBX. What else? Well, Porsche's Cayenne Coupe Turbo GT with 640 PS and a £150,000 price tag might be tempting if you want a really dynamic SUV of this type. If you don't, you'll be looking at models like the Range Rover P530 for a little less than this Aston's asking price, or Bentley's Bentayga Speed for a little more. You'll need a lot more for the Maranello entrant to this exclusive sector, the Ferrari Puro Sangue. Think £350,000 for one of those. Even a Rolls-Royce Cullinan's £300,000 price tag looks affordable compared to that. We could understand if, having considered these other options, you concluded that there's really nothing else in the class quite like this DBX. If so, you'll want to know just how generous Aston Martin has been with a standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. Standard kit includes big 22-inch alloy wheels shod with bespoke Pirelli P0 tyres, along with bi-LED headlights, LED tail lamps, a huge panoramic glass sunroof, roof rails, acoustic laminated side glass and a powered tailgate. Plus, of course, keyless entry, all-round parking sensors, powered mirrors and auto headlamps and wipers. Drive stuff includes triple-chamber adaptive air suspension, adaptive drive modes, electronic active anti-roll control and adaptive cruise control. Inside, there's full-grain Caithness leather upholstery, a 12.3-inch instrument cluster display screen, an Alcantara headliner, a 64-colour ambient lighting system, sports pedals, a sport-design steering wheel and a 360-degree surround camera system. Plus, of course, automatic 3-zone climate control, heated seats front and rear, 12-way front seat power adjustment, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, a reversing camera and powered steering column adjustment. Infotainment's taken care of by a 10.25-inch central display that sadly isn't a touchscreen, but comes with navigation and an 800-watt 14-speaker Harman Samsung bespoke audio system. There's Apple CarPlay smartphone mirroring too, though unfortunately and rather appallingly, no provision for Android Auto. You'd want more if you were to stretch up towards £200,000 for this DBX 707 variant. So, as well as the extra power, you get bespoke exterior looks with gloss black additions and bigger spoilers, plus a more prominent lower rear diffuser. Inside, there's a more unique interior with a dark chrome switchgear finish and micro-perforated upholstery. The seats, here 16-way adjustable, come either in a mixture of leather and Alcantara or, as in this case, they'll be fully upholstered in softer semi-aniline leather, embroidered with Aston Martin branding and featuring a contrast centre stripe. There's a sports exhaust and the brakes are of the track-style carbon ceramic kind. Quite a few 707 folk will be attracted by some of the options we have fitted here. Even bigger 23-inch textured black forged wheels, smoked tail lamp lenses and the 2x2 gloss twill carbon fibre upper exterior body pack, which gets you carbon fibre trimming behind the front wheel arch and on the mirror covers. More extrovert customers might also want the bright lime highlighting we have here for the front spoiler, the rear diffuser, the side skirts and the brake calipers. No one's going to miss your DBX kitted out like this. Whatever your choice of DBX, your dealer will prevail upon you to spend heavily on the various exterior and interior trimming options. For the cabin, we've got Q gloss 2x2 twill carbon fibre inserts here, plus contrast upholstery stitching and an anodised lime finish for the rotary drive selector. But of course, you can go much further than that. A wide range of exquisite wood, composite and metal veneers ensure that the cabin can be tailored to almost any taste. This includes a range of innovative materials, including an industry-first application of a fabric made from 80% wool. A new flax composite, derived from the same plant as fine linen, provides an alternative to carbon fibre for the cabin trimming theme. And if you want to be really bespoke, you can turn to Q by Aston Martin, the brand's money, no object personalisation service. Via this, you can even have the entire centre console fashioned from a solid piece of wood, walnut, for instance. Having spent a pleasant hour or two on the Aston Martin configurator, adding in all that sort of stuff, you'll probably then want to look at the optional packages Aston offers. The touring package gives you a bespoke luggage set, lockable stowage under the front passenger seat, and an emergency package. The event package includes a hamper with a picnic basket, and so you can enjoy them al fresco, a rear-facing seat you can use in the luggage area when you're parked up with the tailgate open. There's an expressions package that adds black or tan-coloured interior features, and an adventure package with roof crossbars, wet bag storage and heavy-duty tread plates. Other specific packages cater for bikers, field sports, smokers and golfers. There's also a pet package, including a portable washer to deal with a muddy dog after a walk. Or you could opt for the snow package, which includes special warmers for your ski boots, perfect for your next trip to Chamonix. And finally, don't forget to keep some budget back for the near-essential Aston Martin tracking system. On to safety equipment. Now, Aston Martin has engineered so much of this car itself, but the Gaydon budget couldn't stretch either to bespoke infotainment systems, hence the criticisms we made earlier, or cutting-edge safety tech. In both of those areas, the brand has had to rely on hand-me-down previous generation Mercedes tech. And you have to say it shows. The basics are there, but not much else. The usual front, side and curtain airbags, plus active brake assist, lane keep assist, traffic sign assist, auto high beam and a door opening warning system. You'll look in vain for anything more sophisticated than that, even for systems that are commonly fitted to humble family hatchbacks like driver fatigue detection. As for any kind of level 2 semi-autonomous driving tech, well, you can forget that too. Perhaps some of this stuff will get added during this car's production run, but we wouldn't bet on it. As we filmed this review, Aston Martin engineers were putting the finishing touches to their 6-cylinder plug-in hybrid powertrain, aware as we are that it can't come soon enough. Most rivals already offer this tech to customers in this segment. With some of them, it's the only option. From the launch of this DBX, though, the only option was the thirsty 4-litre twin-turbo V8 we're trying today. Electrification was somewhere over the rainbow when this engine was developed during the 21st century's first decade. So there's nothing of that sort here, the inevitable result being a pretty sobering set of efficiency statistics which you can monitor via a consumption graph on the centre screen, if you can bear it. Let's get to those. 19.8 mpg on the combined cycle for the standard DBX and 19.9 mpg for this DBX 707. Both deliver a smoky CO2 stat of 323 grams per kilometre. In town, it'll be a lot worse, think 12 to 13 mpg, according to the official urban stats. Aston Martin thinks that on a long motorway run, you might be able to edge up towards 25 mpg, which in theory would give you an operating range of around 460 miles from the 85-litre fuel tank. But that seems pretty unlikely to us, given that even during periods of quite restrained driving over lengthier trips, we've been struggling to get near the 20 mpg mark throughout this test. A 350-mile range is more realistic, and if you drive this car hard, you probably won't even get near to that. The combined efficiency stats we just quoted you are about the same as you get from the huge 6-litre W12 engine used by the Bentley Bentayga Speed, which really isn't good enough. To give you an idea just how far from that the game has moved on in this segment, we'll tell you that the similarly sized and comparably priced BMW XM, a V8 plug-in hybrid that's just as fast as a DBX, manages 188.3 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 33 grams per kilometre of CO2, while offering 55 miles of EV range. Alongside that kind of tech, the cylinder deactivation system in this DBX's V8 seems a bit old hat. This, one of those that under light to mid throttle loads leaves the car running on only 4 of its 8 available cylinders. Anyway, as you can tell from the fuel figures we've just quoted, that tech doesn't appear to make any real difference, nor would you expect it to, given that this car tips the scales at 2,245 kilograms, a figure that Aston actually claims it's quite proud of. The use of bonded aluminium for the chassis has kept curb weight from being even more excessive, and that means that this DBX won't be rotting away in a junkyard in any near decade. In fact, like most Astons, it'll probably be a collector's item of sorts 50 years from now. At least there's something fairly eco-minded in that thought. Residual values ought to be reasonable. Official sources are quoting 56% after 3 years, about the same as a Lamborghini Urus or Bentley Bentayga. Insurance premiums probably won't be. Think top of the shop, Group 50. Servicing can be monitored along with wear for the expensive bespoke Pirelli P0 tyres on the instrument cluster display. Garage visits are required every year or 10,000 miles, whichever comes first. And scheduled maintenance costs are fixed. There's a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty with the option of extending that for either 12 or 24 months when it expires. In the DBX, Aston Martin's management have inherited the most complete exotic luxury segment performance SUV yet made. Yes, there are areas where it concedes ground to obvious rivals, ultimate speed, refinement and practicality, but it's telling that after living with this car, we've concluded that meaningful improvement in any of these things might well detract from the addictiveness of the overall package. Even in standard form, it's as fast as it needs to be. The noises it makes are, by and large, the ones you want to hear. And if it was any more sensibly proportioned, you'd struggle to think of it as an Aston Martin. And that's just the point. This genre may be the antithesis of everything its maker stands for, but ultimately the DBX feels like an Aston Martin. There's an authenticity to brand values here that you just don't get with competitors from Lamborghini, Bentley and Rolls-Royce. That's not to say it's perfect. The DBX needs improvement in media connectivity and safety tech. And the V6 hybrid engine option can't come soon enough. Time is running out for tolerance of the kind of profligate running cost figures this car delivers in V8 form. But if you can somehow justify them, there's so much here to admire. We'd expected a compromise. Instead, we found ourselves enjoying a car which pins that label on its most immediate rivals. This model's importance lies far beyond merely just being the first Aston Martin SUV. It's the car that launched the company's second manufacturing plant and a pivotal design in the second century plan that the brand is pinning all its hopes upon. Luxury SUV buyers won't care about any of that, of course. They'll simply want to know whether this could be the ultimate high-performance model of this kind ever made. The answer is that for many of them, it very well might be.